in that time, Charles passed away, and the car had come back to my house, and it was gonna go get finished. And I'm in the shower one day, and I was like, "What? I'm just gonna put the car together, and maybe I'll just sell it." Like I was like, I don't even care about the car anymore, like whatever, because it was at that shop, and he had his Biscayne there, and whatever. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I go, you know what? I'm gonna paint it purple. And then I put on the fender, on the quarter panels, and on the trunk lid, there's a picture of him kind of tipping his hat, and it says underdog. So that was kind of like my tribute to him. Kind of the same with the wagon. It kind of filled a void of like keeping yourself busy and something to really focus on. So the Nova wagon was kind of the same thing.
I'm Fastlane Jane.
And I'm Design Muse, and today we have...
My name is Skrape.
Yes!
Yeah.
Okay, tell us just a little bit about how you came out to be Skrape.
Came out what? You
I
gotta get that a little bit faster.
Okay.
How you came out... You gotta speed that up a little bit. So anyway, okay.
You know what I'm talking about. Okay, how did you get the nickname Skrape?
Gotcha. So... long time ago, before Black Widow Exhaust, I had a company called Tapout, and my best friend and business partner, when we were first starting, he was renting a room in a house, and it was mid-90s, late 90s, and all he had was a mattress on the floor. And before we started Tapout, he was a correctional officer. He worked in the jails. He worked intake in San Bernardino County. He was a sheriff. And so his sleep hours were off. He worked graveyards, working intake, booking people when they came in. So he was working all night and then sleep in the morning and the afternoon. So he was still on that schedule. Well, I come over to his house I say morning, but it was probably noon, 1 o'clock. I don't know. We were going to go film something or something for Tapout. And I get there and I knock on his door. And as I open the door, I'm 6'7".
Yeah.
And imagine sleeping on the ground on a mattress and somebody coming through your door as you're waking up. And I'm kind of ducking just in case, because I've had staples on my head 3 times now. And every time I've got staples on my head, I'm ducking and I hit the top of my head.
Wow.
So I'm coming through the door kind of ducking, and I'm like, "Hey, you awake?" And laying on the ground looking up at this behemoth of a man coming through your door. The first thing he said was, "God damn, skyscrape mother..."
Oh!
So the nickname, and we nicknamed everybody back then.
Yes.
So, he was the worst with names I've ever seen in my life. I'm pretty good with names. He was flip side. So anyways, the name Skyscrape kind of stuck. And even, so the tattoo on this arm is all family members. First names, oldest to youngest, one side of it. Well, when I went to put my name in there, because my brother was like, "You can't skip you. You got to put, that's where you fall in line with everybody."
That makes
I love
sense,
it.
He said, "Put Scrape." So
love it.
and then he
that's so
said
cool.
do red, so I ended up doing red instead of blue. But
Yeah.
it went from Skyscrape and just had gotten shortened to Scrape over the
Yeah.
years.
I love it. That's a great story.
That is a good
Kinda
story, I know.
I kind of stopped us on the introduction, but that's a really great way to start.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. Yeah, no, my husband, and that's what I was like, okay, where did it come from? And my husband was kind of telling me a little bit more about it too. So
And that's what this whole
That's great.
tattoo on this arm kind of represents too.
Yeah.
So it's like the Eiffel Tower, the Twin Towers, the Chrysler Building is all big, tall buildings, but then it's one building taller than the rest. It's kind of like symbolic kind of thing toward me. And then I put a girl flashing her boobs in a window.
I love it.
There's a guy photocopying his ass. There's a guy sticking his ass in the, people mooning people.
That's good.
Yeah. I put the girl.
I
put
love
the girl
that.
On
with
the
boobs
inside,
in
huh?
Yes.
on the
You try to
inside.
hide that one.
So it's kind of like a secret.
There's a lot of stuff to it. So the owl is like my grandparents had a smoking room they added onto their house, and there were owls everywhere. So I put the owl.
Love that.
This is a friend of mine, Jeremy, that I did jujitsu with for a long time. He ended up killing himself. That was a picture he had on the inside of his arm. But then
got it.
on the corner of the building here, there's a spotlight. So I had already had in my armpit a Tapout tattoo.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Just by itself, nothing on this arm. So when I went to tattoo all this, I put a spotlight, and I'll backtrack. I'll probably get ahead of myself. But Tapout came from Charles, my best friend and partner, was huge into comic book afterlife kind of stuff. His favorite character was Batman. And so when he was coming up with the logo and the name, he wanted it to look like the bat symbol.
Yeah.
Love it.
So when I put that there and I had all the tattoo going, I said, I want a spotlight on the corner of the building.
Like it's showing
and then
that,
it looks like
yeah.
it's not finished.
Yeah.
He passed away when I was about to get this tattooed, and I haven't touched it since. But so it was a spotlight like the bat symbol in my
Yeah.
yeah.
All
Wow.
great stories. I
I
mean,
love
we
that.
could just sit here all day and
Yeah.
just you can just talk.
Yeah.
We don't even need to ask questions. Perfect. I love it.
know. How did you and Charles meet?
A mutual friend. He was, like I said, he was renting that house at a mutual friend. It was kind of like not really the party house, but there was every once in a while there were parties there. My brother would hang out over there, so I ended up going over a couple times. And Charles was, he wasn't really friends with a lot of those people, but because he lived there, he'd come out and hang out a little bit, and him and I just kind of clicked. I wasn't so much the partier. I don't drink. I do every once in a while.
It's like high school-ish?
Right after high school.
Okay,
So
okay.
he's older than me. He's probably 15, 16 years older than me.
Okay.
And so it was just after high school. It was 96. I graduated high school in 96. Aging myself. I don't give a crap. I'm 46. But and so it was right after I graduated high school, and I wasn't a partier. I wasn't really a drinker. But I had all my friends that were hanging out there. My wife and I have been together almost 30 years, so we'd go over and hang out, and him and I just kind of hit it off because he didn't drink either. So we would just be kind of hanging out in the corner, watching all the drunk idiots, just kind of making fun of them, and then we just became good friends.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that kind of leads into the story of how did you guys figure out Tapout, and where did that all kind of
So
lead
he
into
had
that?
already started Tapout.
Okay.
He started it in like October of '96, and I met him a few months after that.
Okay.
So he was from San Bernardino. I'm from Huntington Beach. He started out there, and then it was kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. He was borrowing money from his dad. His mom had just passed away, and he had gotten a little bit of money, so he was borrowing his dad's truck, his dad's motorcycle. He had, not that he was a womanizer, but he was a very good-looking man, and he knew it, and he was a good talker, and he kind of had girls. He had a girlfriend that he would use money from her, whatever, just living. And so he had just started it, and then when him and I became friends, the UFC back then in the late '90s was pretty much dead everywhere. They were only allowed to put the UFC on in like 7 states across the country. There were other fight organizations like King of the Cage. There were some other organizations that were putting on fights more local in California, but they were doing them on Indian reservations because Indian reservations they could do whatever they wanted. It was illegal. We were doing fights. So in Huntington Beach, there were a couple gyms, and they would put on these fights. This guy John Lober that I trained with, he was teaching at LA Boxing. He would put on these fights called West Coast NHB, and back then, mixed martial arts wasn't MMA back then. It wasn't mixed martial arts. It was NHB. It was called No Holds Barred. Because as it grew and evolved into the early 2000s, that name mixed martial arts came along. But this guy, John Lober, was putting on the West Coast NHB, and it was illegal. He would there was one in Compton he put on where we would, and it was literally kind of like Fight Club. You know how it was? You get a phone call, and the fight is here, this time, this date. You knew it was going to be on a Friday night, but you didn't know the location. So you would find out that evening where the fight was. And so this one was one of them happened to be in Compton in a warehouse. And a couple of friends of ours were fighting. It was a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. It was back then you were either a boxer, you were a wrestler, you were a jiu-jitsu guy. Not a lot of guys were kind of mixed in all the martial arts. Well, cops show up. There was a guy outside keeping watch for cops.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, a guy comes running in. He's like, cops, everyone's...
Yeah, right.
So what happened when the cops came in, they had cameras set up because they were filming all this stuff. Well, when the cops came in, they said we were filming a movie.
Oh.
And 2 guys, a friend of ours, Batiste and John, got in there, and they start doing like an exhibition jiu-jitsu match. So when the cops show up, it's like, oh, we're filming a movie.
Yeah.
Cops leave, fighters right back in.
I like it. Okay.
Or there was guys in Huntington, this guy was putting them on, and it was on Beach Boulevard in Huntington Beach, and it was right on the end of a strip mall. It was like Beach in Yorktown, and the whole gym was glass to Beach Boulevard. On Beach, it was glass, and then along the front side of it was glass. They took newspapers and blocked out all the windows. Rampage Jackson One of the first fights he ever had was there, and he fought a friend of ours, Shad Smith, who was Rampage is big. He's 6'. I mean, he fought at light heavy. He walks around at 230 pounds, whatever it is. Our friend Shad Smith was 5'6", 150 pounds. Wanted to fight him, and we had kind of seen Rampage because he was training with a couple guys, and we're like, Shad, no, not a good idea. And Shad's crazy, and he's the guy that has Tapout tattooed on his stomach, the back of his neck. He's like a 3-time felon, got lucky, but he was crazy. He was he was a collectors for the Hells Angels when he was 14. Like the dude was bad. He was legit. Okay. But size comparison. You know what I mean? It would be like me fighting my son, right? It's like size.
If he jumped on your back just in the right way.
He's got a good squeeze. He's got a good choke. But anyways, so Rampage ended up fighting this guy, Fabiano Iha's heavyweight, and Rampage, in typical fashion, which we kind of knew but didn't, he just picked the dude up and slammed him over and over. Picked him up, slammed him. And I'm like, see, Shad? He would squish you. So anyways.
I don't think I like that.
Back then, the fights were real underground and illegal.
Yeah.
And then,
for good reason.
Right. And then we would travel to other states. We went to Connecticut a lot. There was, it's like Uncasville, Connecticut. There's casinos there that people would put fights on at. So it was illegal everywhere. So we were mostly at the time doing jiu-jitsu tournaments.
Okay.
That's where it came from. We were doing jiu-jitsu, and we were sponsoring a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. And then UFC 19 was the first. It was like Jeremy Horn, which he has the most fights ever in MMA, was training with this guy, Pat Miletich, who Matt Hughes and Rich Franklin, all these guys. He was the coach. Big names, but UFC 19 was the first time Tapout was ever on TV in UFC. So that was a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff, but we knew that the UFC at some point, and it was before Dana White, the Fertittas, they bought it in 2001. Our first meeting with them was on 9/11, morning of 9/11 in Vegas. So we knew that the UFC was going to be big, but jiu-jitsu was more often. There were a lot of jiu-jitsu tournaments. And so that was kind of where our roots were. So we were sponsoring a lot of those guys, but there was no money in it. There was no TV coverage. There was no nothing. UFC we knew was going to be the Super Bowl of it all. Yeah. And so we were kind of just going to put all of our eggs in that UFC basket, we called it.
Yeah.
And Chuck Liddell was one of our good friends still. I still talk to Chuck all the time now. Dana White was managing Chuck and Tito. I trained with Tito back when I was talking about John Lober and West Coast NHB. It was LA Boxing in Huntington Beach. Tito was training there, and John Lober was the coach. Well, Dana was managing Tito also. So we knew Dana from that. Well, he came to us and said, hey, the UFC is being bought by these two brothers from Vegas. He's known them since high school. You want to have a meeting with them? Well, we were already sponsoring the UFC, and we had ins with matchmakers and other people, so we would sneak clothes on people without having to pay.
Yeah.
We'd pay those fighters with clothes or a little bit of money we had. This is 99, 2000. Well, Dana said, these guys are buying it. You want to come have a meeting with them? Well, the meeting was set for Monday morning.
Yeah.
We wake up Monday morning, 9/11. And we're like,
wow.
We get on the phone with Dana. I'm like, hey, do you want us to still come out? You want to postpone it? What do you want to do? He's like, if you want to drive out here, no problem, because Vegas is a short 4 or 5 hour drive.
Yeah.
So.
Depending on what you drive.
Baja Forged, signature vehicle builds and off-road products built to forge your own path. Baja Forged was basically made because we loved off-roading. We loved the open roads. If you're looking for off-road products to help you get out on the terrain, visit bajaforged.com. Follow us on Instagram at Baja Forged for our latest builds.
Since 1987, GTS Customs has specialized in resto mod Corvettes. From widened bodies to pro touring vehicles with all today's modern technology. If you've got a Corvette, an old Corvette, and you want to make it drive like something new, contact gtscustoms.com.
My dad and his friend, it's a car, it's the whole car thing. So my dad and his friend, bowling, we were talking about bowling earlier. We're big bowling in our family. So my dad and his friends used to have, there was big tournaments in Vegas, like $100,000 winning tournaments. They have a contest who could make it to Vegas the fastest.
Oh yeah.
My dad had a Corvette. The other guy had like a Trans Am, and they were like, I made it in 3
They
hours
call that
and
the
30
Gumball
minutes,
Rally, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
San Dimas
Cannonball
there.
Run,
Yeah, it was
Gumball
like
Rally, let's do it all.
Yeah,
We were
yeah.
just
Mod
right
ball
there.
rallies, all kind of that stuff. Yeah, so
No, it was 2, but
so we woke up that day and we drove out, and that was our first meeting with Dana, Frank, and Lorenzo Fertitta. Was on 9/11, and we just knew that the UFC. So even at the time, before the UFC blew up, 2005, I think it was when the UFC really kind of hit it exploded because of the Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter was on
the
Spike,
show.
right? The
Yeah,
TV show was
yeah.
on Spike, and then the finale was live on Spike, and it was
Yep.
Diego Sanchez versus Kenny Florian for the belt, and then it was Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin for the belt, right? And everyone knows Stephen and Forrest. I mean, it shut our website down. There was so much.
That's crazy.
So Diego Sanchez was fighting in smaller organizations. I said something about King of the Cage earlier. He was the champion at King of the Cage, and it was like a lifelong dream. I mean, if you're fighting, you want to get a belt.
Sure.
Well, Diego Sanchez had just gotten his belt in King of the Cage. Well, we knew that the Ultimate Fighter was coming along, and we're like, it's on TV. Like,
Yeah.
King of the
Yeah.
Cage, no
Yeah.
one's seeing that shit.
Right.
Can I cuss?
Yeah.
I'm like a sailor, so I'm trying to watch my words. Anyways,
Be you. That's all we want.
So Diego Sanchez had just won his belt in King of the Cage, and we're like, Diego, the Ultimate Fighter is gonna be. No one heard of it. Like, yeah, right. I'm gonna go do this reality show, whatever.
Yeah.
I just won my belt.
Yeah.
We would have conversations with Diego. I remember driving from Huntington to Vegas one time. I was on the phone with Diego in the back of our motorhome for the whole entire trip, I've talked to his mom, I talked to his dad, trying to convince him. And that was not just me. Charles talked to him just as much or more, trying to convince him, go do this reality show.
Yeah.
Who cares about the belt? Give the belt up.
Got
and if
it.
the reality show, the Ultimate Fighter doesn't work, go back and you can win the belt.
Got it.
Like,
yeah.
So he held out so long that Dana had filled all the positions for the Ultimate Fighter. Well, Diego finally said, okay, I'll go do it. Well, they pulled somebody off, which we later found out was, I'm drawing a blank now. He ended up fighting in the UFC, Josh. Anyways, so they pulled someone off and put Diego in. And then Diego ended up winning it in the finale, but then Forrest and Stefan.
Oh, wow, that's sick.
I mean, it was so big. So Diego was wearing our shorts. Chuck was wearing our shirt because he was one of the coaches. We had a logo on the mat during the fights. It was live on Spike. They ran a little ad. Just all it was just our logo with a website. Back then it was inyourface.com. And it wasn't even Tapout.com.
Not even surprised.
Because somebody else had owned it. Somebody else owned Tapout.com when we started because they were selling gear like fight gloves. And they wanted, to us back then, it was way too much money. It was like $3,000 when
Sure.
we
Oh,
were
yeah,
trying
sure.
to buy the
Right,
website.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was inyourface.com. Well, during the during the Forrest and Stefan fight, everyone knows that fight. It's iconic, which everyone says that's what kind of made the UFC what it is. Well, our web guy calls Dan, our partner, and he's like, dude, what the fuck is happening? He goes, the website just crashed. He goes, there's more traffic in the last 30 minutes than we've ever had combined.
Wow.
Well, it's because of what was going on with Spike. It crashed the website. The back end server, it couldn't handle it.
Wow.
So that was, and
Oh,
then,
bummer.
right? Yeah. And then the
Just
bank,
saying.
Good thing or a bad
and
thing?
then the bank was withholding money, and it was. I mean, it was.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
mean,
bet.
we had an
'Cause they were
influx
freaking
of
out.
orders.
Yeah,
Right, right.
like, what's going on?
Yeah, so it was a
Yeah.
growing point, and then
Wow.
and then the UFC, and then we had our own TV show that came on after that, which the Outdoor Network, it was called the Outdoor Network, had switched to Versus. It was the Versus Network, and they picked up a TV show. They picked up our TV show, which was called Tapout, where we would find up and coming fighters, lower level guys, and we'd take them to a fight. And the whole hour was based around that one fighter. We'd get their whole story, where they're from, where they're fighting, everything involved about them. And we'd get them to a fight. We would drive cross country. We'd pick the first guy up was in New Mexico. We drove to Iowa.
Crazy.
And that's where he fought. But that whole time, we're in our big motorhome, and it's just conversating. We fuck around a lot. We burn fields down with fireworks. We were just having fun. And we would get them into the UFC. So it was our TV show called Tapout. And then the UFC had later bought this organization. It was called the WEC, which the WEC was a lot of lower weight guys. So the UFC is, before now, the UFC used to be, I think, 170 pounds, maybe 155, 170, and then light, heavy. The WEC was more 125-pound guys,
Got it.
135, 155. So it was a lot of lower weight guys. They ended up buying the WEC and then just kind of swallowing it all up, all of them. So we would get those guys, and our show was great. And we had the highest rating in our time slot. Our ratings at one point were better than Stanley Cup playoffs and Tour de France. Because it was something different, and the sport was just.
You knew you just needed to get the eyeballs on it.
The sport was
because they would love
exploding,
it.
right? And I think at that point, if you put anything good on TV, it could have done well. But we had a dynamic of the three of us, where I mean, I had my big afro, and Charles had his face paint, and then there was punk ass.
Wait, there's something about this afro, right? More.
Yeah. So we had kind of created these characters where we couldn't afford marketing when we started, so we kind of became our own marketing,
Marketeers,
right?
yeah.
I mean, it started because I was a pimp for Halloween, and I had an afro, and I was like, I'm gonna wear, and I'm 72 feet tall. I mean, you're tall, and
I'm only 60 feet tall.
So
Right.
I was like, the next fight we go to, and it was like a Cobra challenge out in like Saboba. I was like, I would wear the wig just out. Like Charles and I would go to a club, and I'd wear the wig, and we'd get in
And
free.
not just in like one color.
No,
correct?
it was one color. It was either black or brown, and it was just an
Okay.
afro wig.
Okay.
I did have some
Yeah.
other couple ones here. I had like
you did.
a afro puff, and like
And
remember
and-
the Brat? She had like the.
Oh yeah.
Didn't
Afro
you also sport like a red, white, and blue one?
No, I
or
never did the.
Did
I
ever
didn't want to
see
do
you in
the
a
clown.
chartreuse green one.
No. It was like I had
Those
like a
could have been
blonde.
good looks for you.
But no.
Sorry.
It wouldn't have been. I didn't like the whole clown and that kind of thing, because not that I was self-conscious about it, but
You're making a statement.
I would wear the wig. I mean, I would literally have girls come up and be like, "Oh my God, your hair," and I'm like, kind of move away, and they're like, "Oh, it's so soft," and they're like, and this girl was one time a girl was a hairdresser, and I'm wearing
she
this
didn't know,
wig, and she
yeah.
thought it was real. I mean, it was.
It was a good quality
Yeah.
wig.
Good wig.
So, yeah. So.
You made sure it was
Yeah.
right.
So we would be, and then I was like, I'm going to wear this wig to the next fight we go to, because I would wear it everywhere, and people thought it was real. So Charles, he was in the Marines. Kiss was his favorite band,
Okay.
Hence the face makeup.
right?
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
face paint.
Yep.
So he was like, yeah, I'm going to put, and he would already wear his camo. He would wear camo like
Yeah.
fatigue pants. He would wear like one of our wife beaters we sold, and his hat from the military. He's like, I'm going to put face paint on. Da, da, da. So we created these characters, and I still have the yellow notebook papers. When we were driving, we would have meetings like every Friday. We would meet Dan in the middle because he was in Riverside. We were in Huntington Beach. We'd meet. We'd talk about this stuff. Well, when we were creating these characters, Thursday night, Charles and I go out. I wear the wig. We get in free. They're offering us free drinks. We didn't drink, so it was like. So that next day, when we had the meeting, we were telling Dan about this stuff. So on the way home, Charles wrote down on yellow notebook papers, we created these characters.
Yeah.
You knew there was something about it. You
Yeah,
were like,
Charles was
everyone's,
the
catching
mask,
on,
right?
yeah.
The general. He was like the general, the leader, the quarterback, right? And then me, flamboyant, aloof, right? And then Dan driving the bus. So he was the guy that drove the bus, because none of us want to drive a bus cross country. Mm-hmm. So that what we would do was, it's your turn to drive. Like, okay, in the middle of the night, get up, start driving, and Dan's asleep in the passenger seat, and I look over and I'd hit the brakes while he's asleep, and he'd move, and he'd look, and I'd be like this, pretending like I'm asleep. I didn't want to drive, so Charles and I came up with that thing. Like, whenever he gets over, and Dan would take a cigarette lighter and burn his arm to keep himself awake.
Does Dan know that you did this to him?
Well, now he does.
I'm gonna
He
send
didn't
this to him
before.
and tell him.
Perfect.
He might know. Yeah, but
It happened here, folks.
yeah.
Breaking news.
So the character stuff came out of a necessity where we didn't have the money to pay athletes and fighters. We just
Isn't that cool that things come out of necessity
Yeah.
like that? Really, that's
and
what
we
it
were
is.
just weird
Yeah.
enough to do silly stuff like that. And Dan was like our perfectly placed prop. We did all the crazy shit.
You said that really well.
I said it slow, so I didn't
a little alliteration.
because he was just all black. He's 5'6". He could lift up his phone and his bicep would grow. Like, he was real buff, you know what I mean? He just grew real quick when he would work out. But he was all black. And the name Punk Ass came. So it was Mask, Skrape, and Punk Ass, because he had the word Punk Ass tattooed in here. He was all
my
black.
goodness.
Bandana real low, covered it, almost looked like an essay, you know, but
Yeah.
and he was just there for us to pick on.
Yeah.
And that's all we did. And that was kind of, the show was great because you'd get to see these fighters like Donald Cerrone, like Cowboy.
Yeah.
We found him. So our very first episode, we were driving this kid, Damasio Page, from New Mexico, Greg Jackson's gym, to Iowa. We're driving through. Now, I don't know if, I've never even asked them, but a couple of the coaches, this guy Trevor Whitman and Dwayne Ludwig, they have a gym in Colorado. We're driving through Colorado, and I get a text from Dwayne Ludwig, or Trevor, I don't remember which one. Just like, hey, what's up? And we were, at the time, we were filming with Damasio, but we were trying to figure out more fighters for more later episodes.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got that text, I was like, we're in Colorado. They're in Colorado. So we stopped by the gym, and they had 3 guys in there. These are your 3 guys, are the best guys to choose from. Well, both of the other guys ended up fighting in the UFC, and then there was Cowboy. But Cowboy's story was he wasn't a cowboy. He grew up, his parents had some money, but he went out to New Mexico during the summers and did ranch shit and wearing a cowboy hat. Come back to Colorado, he's getting made fun of. He's peacocking. He starts getting in fights because he's wearing a cowboy hat, but he's not a cowboy, whatever. We just love the story.
Yeah.
And then we take Cowboy to a fight. He ends up fighting this guy, Anthony Njokwani, who later on, he beat him, but Anthony ended up fighting in the UFC. So we found a lot of guys on our show organically that ended up becoming big UFC stars and champions and other organization champions. So a lot came from it, which is good.
Yeah, you were finding the talent.
Right.
You knew how to look for it. And
But then there was
what
our
you guys were looking for. Yeah,
crazy asses doing all the wild shit.
But that's part of it. I mean, part of it is bringing that.
We had to make
it,
some
right?
entertainment
That's the
to it
marketing.
also, right? Yeah, because I mean, an hour worth of a fighter sitting there talking about maybe some boring shit. You want to see the fighting stuff, but we add some entertainment to it.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, and I think that the fact that you are all so different, and this cowboy, that's the same cowboy that races.
Yep.
He does off-road racing.
Yeah.
Cowboy has a 300,000 acre ranch in New Mexico.
Yeah.
I just went, so it must have been 3 or 4 years ago now. Dino's Get Down out in Arizona.
Yeah.
It must have been 4 years ago. I shipped the purple 55.
Okay.
I shipped it to Oklahoma. There's a bunch of guys that were going to Dino's. They called it Westbound to Get Down.
Nice.
I shipped it to Oklahoma. My brother and I flew out there, and we drove it with like 20 guys back to Dino's.
How fun.
And then drove it back home. And on the way back, we were driving through New Mexico, and we stopped at Cowboy's ranch. And I hadn't been there since it was 10 acres.
Yeah.
He bought the house next to him, and he's got a racetrack out there.
Yep.
He built a giant sauna. He's got a huge bar. I mean, the size of this place. He just builds everything out there and races. He's got a track that's probably 2 miles long. It's wild.
I love the fact that he was part of the UFC and now he's part of off-road scene, and there's all this cross-pollination and just really.
I think he just bought a 6100
it's this
truck.
competitive.
Yeah. That adrenaline junkie.
And whatever you get into, you got to be good at it. And
Right.
you get into it.
It's the next. It's just the next evolution of you got to stay busy. You got to do something. And he's a guy that can't sit still. So, what's he going to do after fighting? I mean, he was a guy that would fight any. I mean, at the drop of a hat, you give him. He'd fight tonight if he had to, right? And he fought more than anybody. And when that's done, and you realize you're losing, you're not winning. You got to fill that void with something, right?
Yeah.
So, and the next, I wouldn't say the next closest adrenaline thing, but there's a lot of adrenaline in off-road racing. You got to be on your toes. You got to pay attention. You got to train for it. So, it's good to see him doing good there, doing well there.
Yeah.
It's very cool. It's like, I mean, definitely like mixed martial arts. Off-road racing is always evolving. It's not just going around a track in a circle. You don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it's teamwork too, right?
Yeah.
So when you're fighting, you have a team. You have your coaches. You have your strength guy. You have your nutrition guy. You have all this stuff. You have your wrestling coaches, your boxing coaches. In off-road racing, you got to have a team to help you also.
Well,
your co-driver and then all the pit guys.
Yeah. Any type of motorsport racing, really, you have to have that team and those people that it's a misnomer. If people think
it's the segue into the autocross, maybe, or
no. I wasn't there, but no, I think that we talked about a little bit the 55 Bel Air, right? And what's going on over there?
Marcel.
Meta. Sorry.
I'll jump. Okay, I'll segue that right into something with Marcel.
Okay.
I'm sure people know who Marcel is. Well,
yes.
Marcel
here,
was doing some media for us for Black Widow Exhaust back in 2000, probably. Yeah, Marcel and Mulligan were doing media for us in 2014, 15, 16-ish. Well, the whole craze of OBS trucks.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You definitely think of them when you think of that.
Right. So, and I had the damn magazine with me. It comes out at the end of the month, but OBS Buyer's Guide.
Okay.
I have a 90 OBS that's on the
Yeah.
cover right now. I had one in my hand this morning, and I was like, I'm going to bring
in
it.
that magazine.
Like, hold it up. You can show a picture of it.
Yeah.
But then my mom works for me, and I had it, and she's like, oh, I need a copy. So I gave it to her.
Your mom?
Yeah.
Wait,
she
what?
runs our office. Yeah.
It's just because
She runs our
moms
office
are
up.
always that way.
And
right?
so I was like, I'm going to bring it. And then can I have one? I gave it to her, and then I forgot to get one. So anyways, Marcel in 2000, it was 14, in a meeting about Black Widow and everything, says to all of us, he said, somebody needs to buy an OBS. This was 2014. He goes, those trucks are going to be hot.
Yeah. And they weren't expensive at the time, probably, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And me being a 80s, 90s kid, right? So throughout the 80s, I was just hitting my teens, and through the 90s, right? So I don't know what I am, an 80s, 90s kid.
Yeah.
My dad, throughout all the early 90s, he had OBS trucks.
Yeah.
He had a work truck.
You
There was
grew up around,
a crew
yeah.
cab long bed. He had a short bed. And that's what everyone took to the river. Back then, they were
Totally.
lowered, right? And then later
Yep.
on, everyone raised all their trucks. But back then, that's what they took to the river. That's what they towed their boats with. And I'm like, I'll buy one. I love
Yeah.
them. So I went and picked up a 90 short bed single cab in early 2014. And I wanted to build it as, like, my Nova wagon is full pro touring. It's got four
So you're a
aluminum.
full-on Chevy guy. Got it.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to build this kind of like a race truck. I wanted to do and 2015 was going to be the 25-year anniversary of the 454, the SS 454 SS truck. I was like, I'm going to do a better modern version of that truck, because my 55 Chevy, the purple one, has an LSX 454 in it. I worked with GM. It was at Sema. It was at their Monday night party at the Wynn. I was like, I want to build a better modern version of that 454 SS truck.
Nice.
With an LSX 454, right? And it was going to be just a red wrap. And then remember on the bed side of that truck, it just said 454 SS on it. I wanted to put LSX 454. Make it what it was, a cool truck, a driver. So I got the engine. It went to the fab shop. And SEMA was coming up, and I'm like, this truck is nowhere near done. So I have a 55, a two-door 55 wagon. It's a 210 handyman. All original, everything, original 6-cylinder. And I get in that thing one day, and I'm like, we had a booth. It was our first year having a big booth at SEMA, and I'm like, what am I going to put in this booth? We have nothing to put in it. This truck's not going to be done.
Yeah.
And I get in that car driving one day, and I was like, I'll just put that engine in this. And it was my wife's car. Right? And it was just a little 6-cylinder. It ran great. So in the next 2 weeks, I mean, SEMA was like 2 weeks away probably.
Right? These are SEMA stories right
Pull
here.
the engine out, put the LSX
Right?
454 in, and the engine stayed in that car because it was for the truck. It stayed in that
'cause
car
your wife
until
wanted it, right?
Right. Until about it was right before LS Fest last year.
Wow.
So May of 23. So for 7 years or whatever it was, don't check my math, I'm guessing. That engine was in that wagon, and the truck, I mean, at one point, and it wasn't, and Romero, the guy that did all the fab work on it, great guy. He was at my shop yesterday checking out the truck and a Nova I just finished for my wife. He had his shop, he moved shops, he shut the shop down, he went to work for Tom Nelson Racing Engines, him and his dad, who he still works for Tom, but he has a shop in Santa Ana now, he's got the car there, he just was tired of going back and forth. It just wasn't going to happen. The truck wasn't going to be done. So I had gotten all the parts back from Romero. He had the truck still, but then the truck ended up at his house, and then it went to another guy's house. And I was just like, you know what? If I lose, I paid, like you said, they weren't expensive. I paid
$500
$2,500 for this thing. Great running truck.
Yeah.
I loved it. I would drive it. We'd have meetings. We didn't even have an office back then for Black Widow. We would meet at like Caro's or any restaurant. I swear to God. We would meet at Caro's. We'd meet at a pizza place. I think maybe we had the office in Santa Ana, but it was small. Like it was maybe 1,000 square feet, right? And the offices were the size of this table, so it was like there was 6 of us. So we're like, let's meet at Caro's. Right. We could take the whole corner.
Yeah.
So I would drive it to those meetings, the truck, right? And then, so I had gotten all the parts back from Romero because I was like, if I lose the truck, what am I out? $2,500, great. And I had kind of put some parts on this car, parts on that car. Well, COVID hits, and Romero calls me. Well, actually, before COVID hits, a guy comes up to me at a brother's truck show. We had a booth there, and he comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I've got your truck in my garage." And I was like,
How's that possible?
Getting around there, okay.
I'm like, "My truck?" I go, "The OBS?" He goes, "Yeah." Well, I didn't know where the truck was. I knew Romero had it, but I knew it went to this guy's house, and he had to move it, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I've got it in my garage." He goes, "I'm doing some fab work on it." I'm like, "Great."
Awesome.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard about this truck in 6 years.
Yeah.
So fast forward to COVID. Romero calls me one day and says, "Hey, the guy who has your truck died of COVID."
Oh.
Oh, wow.
He goes, "We got to move the truck." And I'm like, I was like, bring it. Like, I haven't seen that truck in
ready for it,
forever.
huh?
So
Okay.
got the truck back and bless my wife's heart. I built a Suburban for Sema in 2010 and overdid it, and so she couldn't drive it. The 55 wagon had the 6-cylinder in it. I put the engine in it. It was not that, I mean, her Nova now, it's a 67, it's got a 500, puts 500 to the wheels, LS6 with a TKX. She could handle it, but she's like, "I just wanted my car just a stock cruiser, right?"
Yeah.
So I had picked up this 67 Nova for her, and I had started working on it, painted it, did some work to it, whatever. And then here comes the OBS back. And I'm like, well, business comes first, because this truck's going to be a marketing tool for the business. Your car is just going to be a cruiser for you. So her car just got set aside while the next year or so we built the truck, right? And and like I said, back to Marcel's credit, in that time, OBS's blew up.
Yeah.
And you can't find one. It could be.
No, I know.
I just found a 350 SS with a 5-speed in it, small block, and it doesn't run, or it runs and has a knock, and it's been sitting forever, and the guy wants like $8,000 for it. And I'm like,
yeah.
So they've
It
blown
still
up in that
doesn't, like
time.
you're saying, not great
Right.
condition. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
like, what?
So the OBS market, and it's like everything. There's
Yeah.
they kind of the C10s
It
and
does.
the square bodies
Yeah, it
and the
comes
OBS
back,
is
yeah.
like, what's next? There's
Yeah.
always going to be something next. But yeah, so I'm a kind of a car guy. I grew up around it. at
So
heart.
how did you said your family, your dad, like had those cars too
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. How did you really get into cars, like customizing them and stuff?
So my dad was so it's weird. My dad and his brother were more Dodge guys, Mopars. Like
Okay.
we had a 69 Charger in our garage.
Okay. That's cool.
I like that.
For
Right? That's
15 years when I was a kid. My dad
Yeah.
built it was a Dan Gurney 340 in it. Well, actually, Willie B, who has a couple TV shows on, bought the 340 10 years ago, and he just sent me a picture of it. He's putting it in a car finally. He's out in Colorado. So anyways, so my dad and my uncle were Dodge guys. My dad was
Yeah.
kind of a Ford guy too. He raced a Mustang back in the day. My brother's a Ford guy, all Fords, and I'm a Chevy guy. So I grew up around cars. My dad would street race here and there just for fun. My uncle would do the same. So that's kind of how I was in it. I always tell people my first car was a 64 Nova wagon. But my first car was a 67 Squareback, a Volkswagen Squareback. But it was, it had a built engine in it. It was white with like teal and pink pinstripes. It was 90s. I bought it, and I always tell my kids when they come to get a car, I'm like, you get $2,500. That's what I got was $2,500 to buy a
That's
car.
rad.
Yeah.
My first car, and I bought a Volkswagen Squareback. And it was fast, it was cool, it was lowered. But then my first real car, I guess you want to say, was a 64. I've always been a wagon guy. I've got a bunch of wagons now, and the first real car I bought was a 64 Nova wagon.
I learned to drive in a 64 Nova, not a wagon.
Yeah.
But I remember the steering so much so that you'd start to turn, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the wheel's not going back.
Yeah.
I have to unwind everything
62
before I
turns.
get
Right.
before I get into a head-on accident. So, oh my goodness.
Give you big arm pump on those things.
Oh well, that came from the
Back in the
Camaro,
day.
yeah, the manual transmission. So then,
Definitely.
how did you take that? And because we met through racing, how did you decide that was what you were going to do? Autocross. Tell us a little bit about that.
So with Black Widow, I had bought a 66 Nova wagon. So in Huntington Beach, there's a famous car show every Saturday morning called Donut Derelicts.
Yeah.
I lived 2 blocks from there. That's where I grew up. Well, one morning, there's a guy walking the show, and there's a red 66 Nova wagon parked there, and the guy is asleep in it. The seat was laid back, and the guy was asleep with a for sale sign on it.
Oh, wow.
So I took the number down, and a few hours later, I gave him a call. He lived right there.
You didn't want to wake him up.
No, I thought about it. I might have yelled, "Wake up," and then he looked, and I said, "Go back to sleep." I don't know. But so I called him a few hours later, went to his house, bought it, had a small block in it. I bought it, that day. And then I had a Corvette. So my mom and my dad were in the Corvettes. My mom had a 93 Corvette.
I'd like to meet your mother.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of different
All
cars.
Corvettes.
Yeah, you have all.
My dad had Corvettes
All
and
these things.
Celines and.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
my mom had this 93 Corvette. It was that dark green one. And I had bought her a new car. That car, it was old, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But I bought her a new car, but I said, I'm going to take that Corvette because I'm going to make it a race car. So I had caged it, put the Kirky aluminum race seats in it, and then I had this Nova wagon. And so we had our TV show that was on for a few years. Well, the producer of it was Pilgrim Films who did the show. Well, the producer of our second season, I think, was doing West Coast Customs,
Oh, okay.
West Coast
Oh,
Customs
okay.
TV show.
Yeah.
Well, they had moved West Coast Customs from LA to Riverside. It was
Yep.
Corona.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason they moved it there was the only reason he can get out of that TV show was by moving it to Corona because that's the only way he could break the contract with what was that show that he did? They put waterfalls in
The
Pimp My Ride.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the
my
only way I heard,
Yeah.
the only way that Ryan can get out of filming
Yeah.
that show was by moving his
Out
whole
of
operation
LA County kind of
out
thing
of
or something.
far enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Okay.
he was doing his show, and the producer of our show was the producer of West Coast Customs. Well, I had to drive past through Corona to my Tapout offices every day
Yeah.
because from Huntington Beach, our office was in Grand Terrace, which is like 20 minutes past Corona. So I had this Nova wagon, and the guy that was the producer knew I was a car guy. Well, he was doing West Coast Custom Show, and he kept bugging me to come check it out. And I'm like, hell no, I'm not having them touch my car. Like I don't need a waterfall in the back of my Nova wagon. That was the perception, right? Like I don't need that stuff in my car.
Yeah.
So he just kept bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. So finally one day I'm like, all right, I'll stop by. I stopped by. I met Ryan. He was cool, and Rory, the kid that was working there at the time, which. Rory's hilarious. I like him.
He
We
is,
got some
yeah.
funny stories. But Rory was working there too. So, and I'm like, and they just kept bugging me. And I liked Ryan. I liked Rory. And the guy that the producer, Ian, was cool. And he just kept bugging me about doing something. I'm like, I'm good. So finally, I'm like, I got this Nova wagon. I'm like, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
I was building the Corvette for road course, autocross stuff. So I'm like, you know what? I'll have West Coast Customs do the interior on my Nova wagon. All suede, black with red pinstriping and the
Nice.
dash and headliner and power seats and all this stuff. After forever, I picked the car up. I'm driving home, and it was probably 6 months longer than it should have been. I get on the freeway, I start to drive, and the whole steering column falls into my lap.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, and that was the first.
you got the interior done.
It was just the interior. That was the first of a trickle effect of problems
gosh.
with that car after that.
Oh.
So I ended up selling the Corvette, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna and me being a wagon guy, and autocross was, getting more popular. I'm like, and I wanted something different, and I'm like, I'm gonna take this interior out because it's terrible. So I made the Nova wagon.
Well, the steering wheel was already gone.
Yeah.
The column. I mean,
made
it's
it
a good
easy.
start.
Made it
Yeah,
easy to tear
good
the
start.
interior out, right? And the seats were half bolted in; they were wiggly, right? So
shoot.
I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make this my race car.
Yeah.
It's different, it's 4 doors. I got my kids; they can get in the back, and so and when I
They
made
can come to the races
Oh,
with
they would
you.
always go.
Yeah.
I had car seats that looked like Recaro
Yeah.
bucket
Yeah,
seats
I love
that
it.
fit in those Kirky race seats.
Perfect.
And I swear to God, I would have those seats in there. Even if I wasn't racing, I would be
Yeah.
at a car show. I'd have the car seats in there, and they were big, tall ones. I can't tell you how many dudes walked up with their wife, and they're like, "See, babe, see, you can put your kids in the." It was over 100 times that would happen,
it.
right?
How
Love
many
it.
Novas could you
There's
have
a high five
sold?
right there.
Yep.
That's cool.
There were more guys telling their wives,
You were
"See,
the
you could
cool
put their
dad."
kids in it." And it was a race car theme, right? I wanted to
Yeah.
feel like a race car. I mean,
Yeah.
I had the steering wheel like that. I still have the car; it's great. But I wanted to put a number on it. So we have 5 kids. We have the 2 little ones, then we have our older daughter. So there's 5 of us. So I put a 5 on the door. I wanted it to be a race car feel. So that was my kind of intro into the autocross stuff. It was, and I kind of filled a void. So it was just after so Charles, back to that, from Tapout, he was killed by a drunk driver in 2009. And when I built the car, I built the purple car. That was kind of an ode to him. The purple's my favorite color. It's his favorite color, the same also. And
listen, my first pair of Tapout shorts were purple.
See?
I'm just saying.
They were helping fund all my nonsense.
Right.
The car, so we used to go to the street races a lot in Huntington Beach, and there was a kid, and his name was Tim also, who had a postcar. It was a 55 postcar, and it was on the ground. It had a big fat tire in the back. It had a nasty small block, and it was gray primered. And I was like, that's my dream car.
Yeah.
And I didn't even care about a color. I was like, I just want it primered and on the ground and loud and fast. I bought the car from a guy that had the 55, had a rear end shop, and it was a full project. It was up on a lift, had no front end on it, no engine, no trans, all original paint, everything. And Charles was building a car with him, and I just kept bugging him. Every time we go over there, I ask him about it. It's like the hound technique, right? Like the dog at the back door just keeps barking. Finally, you're like, fine. I bought it from him, and then I started building it. But I did a frame off, everything, and I was like, I don't care about the color. Just in that time, Charles passed away, and the car had come back to my house, and it was gonna go get finished. And I'm in the shower one day, and I was like, "What? I'm just gonna put the car together, and maybe I'll just sell it." Like I was like, I don't even care about the car anymore, like whatever, because it was at that shop, and he had his Biscayne there and whatever. And I'm like, all of a sudden, I go, you know what? I'm gonna paint it purple. And then I put on the fender, on the quarter panels, and on the trunk lid, there's a picture of him kind of tipping his hat, and it says underdog. So that was kind of like my tribute to him. Kind of the same with the wagon. It kind of filled a void of like keeping yourself busy and something to really focus on. So the Nova wagon was kind of the same thing, where I did some TV shows. I did a show where they covered it. Bud Brutzman had the show. God dang it, I can't think of it. Anyways, so we covered Marcel.
Go to Marcel?
I know. We're almost there.
No, it wasn't overhauling. I'll figure it out. We'll fill it in later. We'll fill it in post.
Okay,
We'll put it in
okay.
there.
I like that. We'll fill it in post.
So anyways, it was something to take my mind off of all this shit going on, right? And even that,
and a tribute too.
Right, and even to that, like if we were so busy with Tapout in, call it from 2000, and Charles was killed in early 2009, but from 2006 to that point, I was gone more than I was home.
Yeah.
We were traveling. We had big accounts out of the country in Canada, Europe, all over the place. So we were traveling a lot. We were filming our TV show. We drove cross country probably 5 or 6 times, filming our show, doing other stuff. So I was gone. And with our oldest daughter, not that I didn't miss Christmases, I didn't miss all that stuff, but maybe a birthday. But so when he passed away, everything just kind of stopped. And I started building some cars. Well, right after that was, and I kind of, it's weird to think about, because if he hadn't passed away, we'd have just kept going, right? The sport was trajectory out of this world. Yeah. We'd have just been right there doing our thing that we had been doing. I keep pointing to my kids over here.
Sure.
You can't see them,
but would they
13 and 11 and when he passed away was March of 2009. September, Labor Day every year, there was a huge car show in Orange County called the Great Labor Day Car Show. It was at the Orange County Fairgrounds. It had been going on. Our oldest daughter, who's now 28, when she was a baby, we were taking her there. We went every single year. We'd bring our motor home. We'd camp. You can camp out all weekend. It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You leave Monday. All weekend that year of 2009, all my friends had their kids there, and I'm just as big as kid as all of them. So I'm playing with the kids. I'm having fun. My wife and I, Monday night, get home, get in bed, and I'm laying there, and she had kind of given up on. At this point, we were 34 maybe. She had kind of given up on the idea of having more kids, right? We were just so busy and whatever, and I'm like, we lay in bed. that Monday night after the Labor Day show, and I go, "You're gonna think I'm crazy." She goes, "You want to have more kids, huh?" Right?
Because she saw you all weekend,
Yeah.
just around it and everything.
Yeah. So
yeah.
to that, it's like, if that hadn't
Sure,
happened,
yeah.
would I, And then Charlie, so his name was Charles.
Aw.
Charlie is named after Charles.
That's cool.
And then Frankie. I don't know, man. It's weird. Like, I hate to think about it, but because they're my world.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Because he's gone, but I got them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't wish that. I mean, you don't wish that on
No.
anybody, right?
No,
No.
no,
So-
no. But you think,
Right.
You know,
I mean,
I know,
we
know.
just kept doing what we were doing. I mean, my wife and I ended up getting married.
Yeah.
In that time, Charlie was 8 months pregnant with Charlie, which is hilarious because we got married at the courthouse. She was 8 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, and the dude marrying us, right? I could just imagine this guy's marrying us at the courthouse, and he's probably looking at me like, this poor dude got this girl pregnant, and he's got to marry her, not knowing we have a 14-year-old daughter at home, right? Like, so we just got married at the courthouse, and then we had a big party at home.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a wild situation where it's like, if he hadn't passed away, maybe we wouldn't have them. Maybe we would. I don't know.
I know.
So it's
Yeah.
like I gave up one, but I got two.
yeah.
And then Frankie's middle name is Alan. Charles, like I said earlier, was the worst with names. He knew my name. He would say Timothy Adam more than anything. He would get on these rants and tangents, and he'd talk about this and that, and Skrape, we're going to do this and that. You know what I'm saying? Timothy Adam. And
I love that.
out of nowhere, he
All
started
right.
calling me Timothy Allen.
Oh.
Right? And I'm like, I know you know my name. So the first couple times he said it, I'd be like, he'd be talking, and I'd be like waiting to like, and I'd be like, Adam. And he's like, I know your fucking name, Timothy Adam. Blah, blah, blah. And the next day or the next week, you're Timothy Allen. And I'm like, finally, I just stopped correcting him.
Right.
So when we were naming Frankie, I was like, I want to kind of have some sort of nod to him. So it was
Yeah.
like Frankie Allen.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't, because I wouldn't want to name her Charles, right? You can't name somebody directly. That just, to me, that's a huge shoe to fill. I mean, he was out of this world kind of person, so it was like, you can't. So Charlie, I would call him Charlie sometimes. So I was like, oh, it's perfect, boy or girl name. Her name was going to be Charlie no matter what.
I love that.
Yeah. That
was
Holy
perfect.
cow.
I think that was a perfect kind of wrap up to
I
everything
agree.
right
Oh
there.
my
huh?
gosh.
Do you want to ask her other little questions? That was fantastic.
Yes.
I said you've obviously got the stories because you've lived an amazing life. You still are, because and with these awesome kids over here too. Bowling royalty over here, right?
Yes. Yeah, we didn't even have a chance to
I
really
know.
touch
Yeah.
on
Right?
them, so we'll have to do this again.
I
Yeah.
know.
Quick question
Definitely.
for you.
Sure.
Living or not living, who you'd like to have a conversation, a cup
Charles.
of coffee?
All day.
Aw.
That's easy.
Yeah.
What would you ask him?
Nothing.
Just shoot the shit?
Talk, yeah.
Just have a conversation.
Yeah.
Just back to the old shit we would do, you know?
Okay, Timothy Allen.
That was good.
See, I start talking about them, I start getting like this, and then I can't go back to that, you know? But yeah, easy. Charles, all day. There's no question about it. It was a whole different... We did something... It's one of those, like, once in a million years, like, that we were a part of, right? The growth of a sport with that person. Everyone's lost somebody, right? I'm no different than anybody else. Everyone's lost somebody, but a person of that personality, it's hard. But like I said, it's like I got them. So, but yeah, I'd 100% him, easy.
Do you ever think he came here to do what he did? His time was done, and now those two little youngsters over there.
I have a million thoughts about that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I wear this around my neck.
Yeah.
It never comes off ever. And it's just a weird thing. I wear it out because then it's like, oh yeah, he can see everything I'm doing. Right?
That's rad.
And when I tuck it in, he kind of rolls around and whatever.
He's right there in the juicy
uncomfortable, right?
bits.
Yeah, so I keep it out. So it's like, yeah. I mean, I
think that's great.
It's Charlie and Frankie know more about him because he's talked about in our house. I mean, I wouldn't say daily, but it's multiple times a week he comes up. I mean, I've got pictures of him, us in my office and around. So it's like he's always there.
He's part of what you're doing still.
Yeah.
Think
every day.
To some degree, when we talk about inspiration, his inspiration lives on through everything that you're doing.
Like a lady.
Right.
Yeah.
And too, I mean, if he hadn't passed away, where would I be with Black Widow, right?
Sure.
I mean, who knows what Black Widow would be? I don't even know because it was one transition to the exhaust company. I was always a car guy, always around it, always had cars. But it was my transition to it. So if he hadn't passed away, we wouldn't be sitting here talking, you know what I mean? Maybe at some point I'd have come around into the circle of the car stuff. I don't know, but I don't think it would be like it is now.
We would have had to call your agent rather than text you to come sit with us,
I'm
right?
a simple man. I'm a simple man.
Well, and with that being said, what would your ultimate dream ride be and where would you drive it anywhere in the world?
My purple 55 Chevy dream car.
That is,
and I would just anywhere. I mean, I live in Huntington Beach, so PCH
You're
is our
already
spot.
living it. Already living
Just
it.
anywhere you can get out and open it up.
That's perfect.
Wow.
I think that's it. That was a perfect.
That was a beautiful interview. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. How do people follow you? Where can they find you? I mean, don't give your address.
Right.
We don't
Might
want
get
you
a little
to follow
creepy.
him like that. but-
Might get a little
Social
creepy.
media, everything is at Black Widow Exhaust. I have a couple different Instagrams, but the car stuff is Skrape's shit.
I love it.
Easy.
Love it.
That's crazy.
It was awesome. It
There's
was
so many
amazing
ways I
having
can
you
go.
on today.
Yeah, there's so many ways I can go with that.
Right?
Yeah, he works for animal control. He's picking up. Yeah, anyway. Oh my gosh, you guys! Thank you for following along here. I'm Fastlane Jane.
And I'm Design Muse, and we had on.
I'm Skrape. Thanks for watching.
Woo! All right. Until next time.